we have to be very careful about the floor. So don't drink here, don't eat, don't spit, on each other also. So this is the main important thing. And tomorrow, it's just from Pavel Pola, who is here. Okay, yes. There will be Fortna open from 8 o'clock tomorrow in the morning. I just want to say it now. For those who want to have coffee, okay? And if you come whenever later or during the day, you need to ring the bell at the reception. This is the most important thing. But otherwise, we will inform you every day. The thing is that everything is happening here, okay? Okay, lunch is here, breaks are here, and the lectures are here. Some of you are here also sleeping. Okay, that's all from me. Whenever you want to ask me.
Except of evening meals, then people will have...
Yeah, except of evening meals, you can choose some of the nice restaurants around Prague. You can make small groups. It's really up to you how you want to spend your precious time in Prague.
And there is Maťo, or where is Maťo? Yeah, you can see where is Maťo. Maťo, can you stand up? Maťo has the information about restaurants around, so if you do not know where you want to go, you can ask Maťo and he will direct you. Okay, so thank you very much. And now... Good. So let me introduce the theme of the conference for this year: human childhood and maturity in theological perspectives. This would be a developmental approach to theological anthropology. And for that reason, I have chosen perhaps less usual conversation partner. In 1981, James William Fowler, an American Methodist theologian who was professor of theology and human development at Emory University, wrote a book which soon became a standard book for psychology of religion, Stages of Faith. In his sketch of developmental process in human faith, he integrated cognitive theory of Piaget, Erikson's developmental psychology, and moral theory of Lawrence Kohlberg. And already in the first chapter of the book, Fowler relates maturing in faith to the probing questions, which I found actually really quite intriguing, and I think I'm going to take them for myself for the retreat. What are you spending and being spent for? What commands and receives your best time and your best energy? What causes, dreams, goals, or institutions are you pouring out your life for? As you live your life, what power or powers do you fear or dread? What power or powers do you rely on and trust? To what or whom are you committed in your life, in death? With whom or what group do you share your most sacred and private hopes for your life and for the lives of those who you love? What are those most sacred hopes, the most compelling goals and purposes in your life? Fowler argues that faith and utilitarian thinking are not fully compatible. He says that faith, whether it is religious faith or other faith, he differentiates, but he speaks about faith in very general terms. He says that faith must enable us to face tragedy and finitude in the devastating and bewildering particular forms they come to us without giving to despair or morbidity. Faith must name and face that deep-going tendency in us to make ourselves and the extension of ourselves central to the world. And he goes on and on when he speaks about faith in general. And he says that still that faith must provide people with some sense of liberation and redemption. As I already said, faith for him is broadly understood and is related to human maturing. However, he is aware that people don't mature just by getting old. I remember one of the Czech fairy tales, which is called Salt is Better Than Gold, when the clown says that it is possible to get old without getting wise. As one gets older, it's perhaps worth reminding ourselves about. It's possible to age without getting wise. But when Fowler sketches the stages of faith, he distinguishes 6 stages, and the first of them they copy the physical maturing. But the later he is not so sure, and further he goes, the more difficult he finds it to describe them. There is an intuitive, projective phase of childhood, mythic, literal phase people struggle with in their prepubertal later childhood, synthetic, conventional phase that presents a challenge in puberty, with its revolution in physical and emotional life, as he says. And then there is individuative, reflective phase that usually corresponds to the early adulthood. Conjunctive phase, which is still more difficult to describe. It's a complex style of a dialogical and dialectical phase, or faith knowing, that can be perhaps described only by means of analogies. And finally, the universalizing phase, that which he characterizes as self-transcending phase of full maturity. These stages, they are for Fowler-like scaffolding. They don't have any prescriptive content. But that scaffolding can help people to give them criteria, how adequate, responsible, or free of idolatrous distortions their way of appropriating and living from particular tradition of faith actually are. So this is the beginning with my conversation partner, who also has one, I would say, slightly problematic point, and it is related to theology. As I said at the beginning, he himself taught theology, apart from the development. But the way he understood theology also was related to the fact that he was aware that theology can become an obstacle, something which we more and more experience, especially in Western universities, or if you prepare projects with psychologists and sociologists in particular, then you will notice that you are an obstacle, whether you are or whether you are not. But this is, I think, the prejudice which is spreading well again. For Fowler, there is a question mark with the obstacle. But he is very careful to say that his approach is not theological. He deliberately avoids theological reading because this would create obstacles and sidetracks. Why would that be so? Because he understands that theology is normative, it offers normative perspectives, and that it's primarily on being, character, or the will of God. And especially the latest, the will of God, can do a lot of violence to people. So to avoid it altogether is for him a way out. The stage theory, he repeats, is not a theology. It has no religious richness or sufficiency to offer, which is the weak point of it. But still, he would not see theology as an enemy. It simply is not, or not yet, or not at the moment, ready to take certain tasks, and hence other disciplines come and help when it is needed. And he finds the help especially in the developmental psychology. But when speaking about faith, however universally he understands it. He, at the end of the book, says that there is no faith without grace. In our conference, we will try to go the other way around. We will try to start with the theological, and we will try to look at the question of maturing theologically. And of course, we will refer also to the physical, mental, spiritual development. But I think the theological component, even if not only Christian theological component, would be a necessary part of our reflection. I think in Christian tradition, we are in relatively good company. When we look at the process of maturing in the New Testament, usually Paul comes to mind. And there would be texts which would conflict each other, which is one of the beauties of the Bible, the beauty and the annoyance for the fundamentalist. There is the very well-known hymn about love in the 1 Corinthians, when Paul speaks about the childish ways which he left behind when he became an adult. So childish ways, it's not a compliment if somebody behaves in a childish way. Don't tell it to my teddy bears. And then there is the letter to Philippians, where we would have a slightly different image. And it would be the image of growth, from where there is the famous concept of epektasis, which is related in Paul's imagery to maturing. He is striving towards something which he is not yet. And this forgetting what lies behind and straining forward to what lies ahead is very characteristic for maturation. And he says at the end, those of us then who are mature, be of the same mind, which is slightly a puzzle in the text. Maturity and the same mind, it comes from some other discussion and it emerges there. But I think it helps us to see that his notion of epektasis is about maturity. There would be many other texts where Paul explains what he means by the maturity and what it actually is, but we do not have now time to go into that detail. I would like now to use slightly different examples, and this would be various images in the Gospels. And again, I can use only a couple of examples. Jesus receives children. He calls God Abba. He uses the image not only of the children of Abraham in a sense of posterity, but also of the children of God. And yet it doesn't mean an excuse for remaining childish. Childhood in this light is not a deficiency of adulthood, but neither an idealized paradisiac stage. It's interesting if we look, for example, into Matthew, into some fragments, to what childhood is related at a symbolic level. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God. Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be the children of your Father in heaven. Unless you change and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of God. There is nothing childish about these texts. Becoming like children perhaps means straightforwardness, perhaps directness, perhaps purity, and we still can go deeper and deeper. But then in the same gospel we find also this beautiful text about the comparison of this generation, our generation perhaps as well. To what will I compare this generation? It is like children sitting in the marketplaces and calling to one another. We played the flute for you, and you did not dance. We wailed, and you did not mourn. And then he speaks about John the Baptist and about himself. So these are just a couple of examples to show you how complex the images are already in the New Testament. And now I would like to make another move to the 2nd century, to Saint Irenaeus of Lyon, the church father which will take us, I think, from the beginning to the end of this conference. The dynamics of maturing addressed by him in the 2nd century has different facets. He speaks about Adam and Eve being created as children, free and immature. I love the speculations. He says that they were probably of the prepubertal age, and then he develops it. And in other places he says that Jesus probably died as an old man, because as he was all to all, he also had to be an old man to the old. I just love and adore the creativity which is present there, but also the depth. And it will not be a lecture on Irenaeus, this will be at the end, you can look forward to that, but maybe just a couple of hints which can help us at this stage. To be fully human presupposes to be able to live with the knowledge of the good and evil. But the children, Adam and Eve, couldn't bear that because they were not yet mature in the spirit. They were not yet free to know the good and the ill, and to choose the good and to mirror that goodness of God. The link between understanding and participating in God are sharply in contrast with the secularist understanding of humanity, which during the last couple of centuries provided background against which theologians had to justify their positions. But again, we will not go this way this time. It's interesting that even in the broad understanding of faith Fowler pleaded for, there is something that can actually coexist with the Irenaean paradigm, that does not exclude the experience that there are many people of goodwill in whom we can see the beauty of humanity, even if they cannot make sense of religious faith. So I am not closing this door, but I am just descending a little further into one particular tradition of religious practice, and in that, even into one particular small segment of what can perhaps enlighten us. While Fowler's universalism is different from that of St. Irenaeus, in which Christ is all to all, perhaps St. Irenaeus can show us precisely the content and the religious richness of particular tradition, which Fowler said the stages of faith cannot offer, because it was just a scaffolding. In the Christocentric sketch of St. Irenaeus, repetition plays a very important role. But there is a paradox in that repetition. Christ came, he became human to give people a second chance, to repair what has been destroyed and almost lost. But he is not only the second Adam, he is also the first before all the ages. He is not the first, he is before the first and after the last. The vocabulary here just breaks down. It doesn't serve the ways we are normally used to. The one who is all to all, as he became an infant for the infants, child for children, young person for young people, and old for the old. Don't expect in his texts inclusive language. This is a modern phenomenon, so don't get upset because it is not there. It simply is not, but it doesn't have to be an obstacle. But what he makes a very strong emphasis on is the sanctifying. Christ came not only as an example, but he came to alter human condition. And here in Irenaeus, we have a very similar position, which would be in St. Athanasius and other church fathers. He became what we are in order to make us what he is himself. So we have here one of the sources of the teaching on deification. But what is interesting in Irenaeus and in his developmental understanding, he warns against people trying to go this way too fast. If you want to become mature too fast, you will lose your way. And he gives advice to take more seriously perhaps the humility and accept the stage in which you are. And even accept that you are lost at times. Because if you don't, you would create a false deification. You would want to become like God, placing yourself in the position of God. But instead, it's better to wait for the Spirit and to mature in the Spirit and to cooperate and collaborate with the Spirit. And I think in this context, in this developmental context, when he speaks about Christ and when he speaks about Spirit, he can speak about what really it means fully to be human. He says, the glory of God is the living human, and the life of the human is the vision of God. One is impossible without the other. Immature people cannot bear the vision of God, and therefore God spares them from that. Instead of giving them the final goal, God gives us the journey. As I said, gender-inclusive language, openness towards wisdom present differently in other religions, and all kinds of other modern and postmodern sensitivities are not there in St. Irenaeus' text. But it is a good and concrete example of how we can think about the process of maturing theologically. And we will return in more detail to St. Irenaeus' project in the final lecture. His concepts, however, fits well with the theme of our conference, that focuses on the different stages, obstacles, and opportunities of growing into human maturity, which includes themes such as theological reflections on being a child and an adult, on being a parent, on living with a disability or illness, on the difference and the link between maturing, aging, and preparation for death. Conference presentations will pay attention to the personal, the social, and the religious dimensions of these themes. But theology will not be absent. The conference will explore how these themes re-emerge in the experience of pandemic and political and economic instability. But this would not be the main focus. But we will follow theology into all these directions. But we will also analyze different theological notions of time and fulfillment and discuss in which sense a Christian theological anthropology sees the end as the beginning. Thank you very much for your attention.